Alright. Let's see how much we can get done today. I'm gonna go with this today. It's a late day. All right. So, what we need to do is we need to handle cast animation. Which is done here. This is how it's done right now. We're setting animation state. And that's not really how it's done anymore. But how is it done? How do I want to do it? Do I want to use an enum for states? I think I kind of do. Probably. Because we do want to use a state machine type system, right? So it's gonna have to do that. So handle casting animation. That should be as simple as when we enter let's see, dual end, dual transition. Here, let's put case LOT combat phase dot end of casting break. But I don't want it to be called that. I just want it to be called casting phase. I don't know what else to call it. I don't really want to call it like phase. But should I just call it casting? So this is set combat phase. So when we enter combat phase casting, that means that whatever, like we've already determined that the action has a cast. And that's here in action initialization, right? This is gonna be like if action to trigger dot as cast time greater than 0, then we're gonna say set base combat phase dot casting. Else, if action to trigger dot use dual scene, then we're gonna say set combat phase LOT combat phase dot dual transition. Now, I don't know if we really need to do anything more here. I don't know. I feel like this is something that could break, because we're just breaking. Because otherwise, if there is ever like any other edge case here where we are just initializing an action, then I'm not really sure where else we would move it, other than just like action execution immediately. So let's just set it to action execution as an else. But I'm also gonna say yeah, because I feel like this shouldn't really ever happen. Because it should always be either like a spell or something. Or if I need to have like some other kind of base. But I think that should be right. And then here, if combat phase is casting, then we're gonna say current turn dot unit dot animation state. Is that what I'm doing though? Run animation manager. This is ancient. I think we should just set an animation state. Casting init. But I don't think that's actually true either, because set as casting. That's what we have. But then the question is, yeah, no, that's fine. This is where we initialize, right? Something as such. And then here, this is where I'm a little bit more unsure. Let's see. Action initialization. This is update. We don't need this in update. But it is doing null check there, which is probably a good idea. Like that. Like how ass my microphone arm is. Like every single thing that I do, like I just touch it a little bit, just goes straight into the microphone. Great. Where are we now? Doing that. And then we need to go to update. Action initialization. I don't know if this really needs to do anything. It could. This could be where we want to do a dim. Do dim? Question mark? I think so. Or at least where we want to start it. Because I think otherwise, like dimming would probably be... Oh, wake up. Because it needs to be like... We need to determine what we're gonna do here. So if current turn dot unit dot cast, let's see, combat module dot cast spellcasting state is greater than 1. But rather that's going to be greater than spellcasting state dot startup. If it is greater than spellcasting state dot startup, then we're going to say if action to trigger dot cast time is less than 1 equals 0. Probably smarter. Nah, let's do less than 1. No, let's do 0. I was just a little unsure because it says it's a float. And I always think like, oh, I gotta do like a procs and shit. But I think doing using equals operators on 2 floats actually does a procs already by default. I read something like that just the other day, but I don't know if that's true in all C# versions. But either way, it should be 0. I actually have no clue how floats work. Like I know how an integer or a byte and bits work, but a float I have no clue how that like actually works internally. But yeah, see here, if action to trigger dot cast time equals 0f, and current turn dot unit dot loop combat module dot. This is one of those cases where I'm not really sure how I want to handle things, because when you control the characters via the main controller, you then have to read what state the character is in at all times to determine what you're going to do with it. While if the character just kind of handles itself, then you can trigger like the spell, for example, at the end of the casting animation, because the character just knows when it's done casting, right? Because otherwise you have to create like some kind of boolean or variable or whatever that determines that yes, we were casting, now casting is done, which means you can now trigger this effect. And I don't really like either method, and I don't like mixing them either, so I've been kind of yo-yoing between them a little bit. Like, having objects trigger their own stuff, it makes sense, like logically to me, because it's like it just feels like it's more natural, where you just have the character handles its own casting animation, it handles when it starts and ends, and it handles when it casts the spell, etc., etc. But the issue is that because the game is turn-based, everything is handled in like a turn-based order. It means that the game code kind of flows in and out of multiple different scripts. So when you're trying to follow, like, in which order does the combat sequence execute, it's just gonna be like blank in the middle, because it's all actually done elsewhere, like inside of some other script where it's like just doing some other shit. And it makes it really hard to read and follow and keep up with. So to me, both solutions are kind of tedious. But It could be okay, like maybe I make the character able to trigger the spell itself. And then it just calls a function from the main controller that progresses the combat phase. And then I just make sure that I write a comment here that explains how it works. Hmm. I'm trying to think as much as my brain will allow at the moment. Because the idea is that I want to handle casting here, right? But we're not gonna switch over to action execution until we are ready to immediately trigger the spell effect and run its behavior. And because of that, I need to have some kind of casting update where we're just gonna be checking on the current unit. But what I really don't want to do is read the animations, like the current animation time index. Because that's what I have been doing in the past. I've been saying if, animation time is greater than animation length, then that's when we're done casting. But I really don't want to do that. There's also a problem. Because now, if I'm trying to read in the update phase, because I have update and I have combat update and I have late update. And we are right now in combat update, which happens like between the two. And in late update, I'm handling rendering and animations and stuff like that, UI, camera, things that come later. If I'm in combat update right now, and I want to know if we are at the end of spellcasting, like if spellcasting has ended. We are now actually behind. We're delayed because, or we're like, yeah, well, something like that. Because if the animation time index updates later in the late update, that means that the animation won't actually end until we are in the late update. But I don't think I'm actually doing it like that. Let's take a look. I think maybe I am just doing it in update. Because here we're updating time, camera update, shader shit, check mouse, infinite amounts of commented stuff. And then here we have combat update now. Aww. Huh? There. I'm running update here? Does that make sense? Yeah, that's hard. I think this might be wrong. This used to have a lot more stuff in it, but now it's mostly nothing. Like, this is nothing, if not active. This is kind of nothing. I would say that the update is doing nothing right now. Just 100% nothing. And the question is, should this update come first? I think so. Because what would this need to do? Update would need to handle input, I would say. So like if you control a character, that should be done in update. And I don't know. I don't know if this is late update. Here we do like sorting for rendering, shadow buffer, light buffer, pre-rendering, updating rooms and buildings. Then we render. So I'm not really doing that much here. And that's why I think that I think this should probably be before combat update. I'm just thinking like what situations would it matter? Right now it doesn't matter at all because update isn't doing anything. But I think it should handle animations, perhaps. Maybe not. Maybe it should just handle logic. And it's just like... I don't know what logic that would be. It would be like exploration mode movement, or like NPCs walking around in exploration mode. But also I'm thinking animation. Because if we just handle updating the animation in update, and we do that first, then that way we will know when we get to the combat update, we can know that this object has finished casting. And also, if I set it to cast, then what? You see here, we're setting the combat module to spellcasting state equals startup. And the idea with that is just that we set it to that, and then the animation module is going to just handle that. It's tricky because here's my current dilemma. Like, what I'm doing right now is I'm playing the animation by incrementing the animation time index by time elapsed times the animation speed multiplier. Right. And that just plays the animation. And then I have to like sync the animation to it, or I have to sync the logic to it by just making sure I execute them at the same time. But I'm wondering if it's smarter to just say, you know, we have an action execution time. And that's not part of the animation system. but it's part of the logic system. And then the animation system simply reads that. And we never have like increased animation speed by having like, we don't have any animation that ever has an animation multiplier or anything like that, really. It's just an object that is executing an action, and the action has a speed multiplier. And that way the animation itself will also be faster, because we're just reading the current time index of the logic rather than having a time index for the animation, right? But that also creates an issue. Because the time index of the animation, the animation itself has a duration, right? And it's the fact that the animation has a duration which allows me to end it, right? Like, if I just have like an internal logic, then that logic would also need to have a time frame for like when it ends. And a lot of words for a lot of nothing being said. Not my fault if you don't understand. I'm alright. I'm trying to determine if my execution logic is happening in the right order. And if I need to move some stuff around, I think I might. Yeah, I think that's probably okay. I would have to manually set the length of the action. But I think that's okay. That's like an okay overhead. I think it's okay to have to do that. And then we'll play the animation independent of the logic, and we're just gonna, if there's a mismatch between the length of the action and the length of the animation, then we're just going to end the animation, I think. Or just like hang it on the final frame. But the question is then, what values would a length be? Because an animation is, its length is just determined in frames. Is that what I should do? Length should just be determined by frames. Well, in some cases I've used like for like casting animations or something to determine like if we're done casting, I've used the current animation time index and check that against the animation length to see like, are we done? And if we are done, then we progress the code from there. And I just don't like it. I feel like animations should be updated, not last, but like second to last. Like after like the logic should just be like the internal stuff that's happening. If the internal logic just changes the combat state to something else, then, you know, like the update might do something, and then after that the combat update step happens, and then maybe that overrides like whatever we did in update and sets the unit to another state. And then after that, that's where animation should happen. And the animation should just check the object and see what state it's in, and then it's gonna set the animation to that state, and it should also just set it to the correct time frame, which should then just be the actions, like the actions time index, because that way we don't need to play an animation. It's just like we're just setting the animation to the correct place within the animation based on like where in the actual action we are right now. And my current issue is a lot bigger than that because I've restructured a lot of the code and I'm trying to fix things. So like I'm restructuring how combat sequence plays out to make it more readable. By just having it be a series of phases that you go through like this. Instead of having like half of it be in like the mouse controller or in the fucking object or whatever. I'm just trying to make it a lot more clear. And in so doing, That's where there are certain phases where like here in the casting phase, I have to keep running this phase until the casting animation is finished. And that's where I am. That's why I'm thinking about the things I'm currently thinking about, because I have to have a way of telling when the unit has finished casting. And if that's based on the animation, then the animation needs to update before we get to the combat phase. And that means that if anything happens in the combat phase that changes the state of the character, like maybe it's being hit on the same frame or something, that's going to fuck things up. And that's why I'm thinking I need to change this to have like stuff like casting and attacking and using abilities and whatnot. Those time frames need to be handled as logic and not just an animation time. No, it's that if I don't update the animation time index before I get to the combat phase, then I can't know if the casting is finished. I'd have to like check ahead or something. And even then, if I change, like if here I change the state, then it's not gonna update the state until like the next frame, which also makes things weird. So it has to be, I have to change it to what I'm saying. It needs to have a, the update needs to happen first. Hello Sam, how's it going? So here's the combat update. Here's the effect update. This one is a little tricky. So here I'm doing play effect. But then this should also just be the animation update. This here, the command execution phase, is gonna get deleted. Here, combat update. So we need to run update. I'll be right back. Alright, I'm back. Alright, so. How do I handle this? It would just have to be something like action time index plus equals main controller dot now I have a bunch of different delta times here. I have one called logic delta time, but I don't know if that's really the one I want to use. Because that's using the target frame rate. Well, Square, how's it going? And using the target frame rate. I feel like that's something that should maybe be done. But not there. Current animation delta time. See. I think that's what should be done, or that's what we should use. Because if I use the current animation delta time, what's happening is we're multiplying time.delta time by 15. And the reason I'm doing that is because if you just use time.delta time, what happens is that it transforms whatever values you're using or whatever values you're adding to something into that value over 1 second. But when I multiply it by 15, that then becomes the frame rate. That means that we are progressing 15 frames over 1 second, right? And that's the speed that I'm animating. It's 15 FPS, I think. And because of that, the logic should also happen at 15 FPS, I think. It's only minor stuff like walking that might be better off being handled by current delta time, or by target frame rate rather. But I don't think it'll actually matter. I don't think it'll even be noticeable. Because the game isn't really designed visually to like matter if you're running it at 144 or 60 or... Because all the animations play at 15 frames per second anyway. And so, I'm just thinking, I should rename this to something. I don't even know if I should use this current logic delta time variable. And I'm kind of thinking if I should rename the other one to that. But here I'm setting move speed being based on logic delta time. And that explains why my move speed is so fast all of a sudden, I think. So... But it's the only one using it as well. So I'm thinking we get rid of this one. Well, let's check current animation delta time first. This is being used in some places, but not that many. So let's delete that. And then we rename this to current logic delta. Now we just wait for it. There we go. My IntelliSense isn't very fast anymore. All right. Then in here, we now have an action time index that's just gonna get shit added to it. Every update. But that doesn't really make sense either. Does it? Because now... Nah, it kind of does. But now the issue is... Now I have to determine the length of every action. While before, I could just say, like, your current state is casting. And then it would just play the animation until it was over. But now, I need, like, so now we have a current animation here, but I kind of need to have, like, a current action. But an LOT action, I think this is old. Because I have, these are combat actions. So should I inherit combat action from action? That way I could have, like, regular actions and also combat actions. Without needing to have, like, cooldowns, heat cost, action point, range, area size. All it needs to have is an ID, maybe, an action name, and action length. Does this make more sense? I mean, I feel like it's more overhead, like more work. Because now I have to create a database for this too. Like, now everything needs to be an action. But I guess maybe that could be beneficial. It could be useful for scripting, because I need to do scripting in a way where I need to create a scripting language for the editor, where the editor is going to allow you to create a scene, like playing a cutscene. And in that editor, I need to be able to tell an object that it's going to execute an action. For example, like a character might need to play a talking animation. Like, one way to do that is to just set the state of the object, right? To just talking. But another would be to call an action. Like, now we're gonna call talking action. And then that action will play the animation. And what I could do as well... Is this the play? Because the way it works now is I have an animation module. And the animation module is a kind of a clusterfuck. Like, it has a list, or I made a dictionary that's like, this is a custom enum that I wrote myself. Well, I didn't write it myself, I googled it, but this will load in and store all of the animations that this character uses, right? But what if instead this was all the actions that the character uses? And then the action itself stores its animation. I can still have all the animations in the database, like I am doing right now. In fact, I probably should. But the action itself would also point to that animation. And that way, we could even make idle an action. And then idle itself could handle input to some degree. Like, it could read the user's position, and in that sense it'll set its state. That way I don't need to have like idle up, down, left, right. I can just have idle or idle combat. And then it just contains these four. I mean, it'll still be the same, but now the issue, right, is that this list is going to get even more bloated. Here I have this one spell called Barrier. And, you know, it's already this big because it contains so much stuff in it. But I do have it separated into combat here, but I feel like it should be per character. So right now it's like LOT object. Well, you can't do it there, but LOT object actions dot combat dot skills dot spells dot Astria dot Templar dot barrier. It's like that. But instead it should be dot skills. In this case, spells are kind of like universal. They're meant to be kind of universal. But if we look at combat.pc.pc.ria, triple stab, right? This is where it should be more like object actions PC ria combat skills triple stab. And then she should be able to have I don't know what to call the non-combat. Maybe exploration. And here, I don't know. Just idle, like right there. And then action, like idle, should contain behavior, logic. And then the action itself contains its length and its current time index, I think. The time index could be in the object, it could be in the action, it could be on the object. I don't think it really matters that much, to be honest. But that way I could also have casting be an action with multiple parts. So instead of having like casting startup, casting loop, casting finish, I would just have a casting action. That it would just stay in the loop of until instructed otherwise. I'm just thinking. Thinking and trying to overcome brain fatigue. But I think I like this approach. But now that kind of begs the question of how necessary is the animation module at this point? Because the logic module is like the animation now. While the animation really doesn't do anything other than it's like a final step where it just sets the animation based on the current time index. I am going to do this public float. I'm going to do that. Because the action itself might... It might be easier that way if we... I mean... I don't think it really matters either way. Actually... Let's do it this way. And in order to execute an action, we have to take in an object. I think. I don't know if I actually need an ID. But I could. And here we have a behavior which takes a main controller and a user. Now see, what I don't really like is when objects tell the main controller what to do. But I also hate reading objects in the main controller in order to know what to do. So it's... So if we look at this says behavior. And action says execute. So the question is, should I move behavior here and just call it behavior instead? End behavior. Hmm. This is stupid. Like, how would the code look for this? Like, just walking up and down, left and right? How is that gonna work? It's just gonna be like, if I press the button, it's going to set the action to walking. I mean, I guess. It honestly, like, it feels a little awkward. But at the same time, it's actually exactly the same as an animation system. And like all of the same, like all of the work that I'm looking at that I might have to do for this, like setting a length or setting this and that, all of that, it's already true because I have to do it for the animation anyway. So it's just going to shift where the work is rather than being more work. I wish there was some kind of directory that had ranges. I could probably write that myself. C# directory with ranges. Ranges. System.range. C# has no syntactic way to access ranges or slices of collections. Usually users are forced to implement complex structures to filter/operate on slices of memory or resort to link methods like list, skip 5, take 2, with the addition of system.span. I don't see how this would be difficult at all. But the reason I'm talking about this is the way my animation system works is that each frame has a duration. We find one that's written. Yeah, here. Like, I need to create a frame order and a frame duration. While it would be ideal to just have like a directory and the indexer is just an integer, and I can just say like the first entry should just be like -1 or whatever, like 0. I don't know. I don't know why I have -1s here though, but if I could just say 0 as the value for my first directory entry, and I just give it a key that's just 0, because that's the first entry. But then the next entry is a value of 0 or 1 or whatever. But that one has a key that's like 14. And that way, if we try to access the directory with any value from 0 to 13, then we'll get the first number. While if we use 1, or if we use 14, then we'll get the next one. Because that way, the key would be the duration. Instead of now, it wouldn't really solve that much, but it would suck a little bit less, I think. Hello, Nicholas. I am programming a turn-based RPG, and I am trying to hammer out some back-end stuff. I'm working on getting my combat phases to work better and be more streamlined, and right now I'm trying to figure out what I'm gonna do with my animation system. Right now animations play by having a time index that I'm incrementing every frame, and then we just flip over to the correct sprite based on that. But I'm thinking of moving the time over to an action component instead. So like the action itself has the time, and then the animation just checks what the time on the action is, and then it just sets the sprite based on that. And I'm just going through things here a little bit, trying to just figure out where to go from here. And I was just looking at finding a better solution for this. Adding index and range support. I feel like it would be so easy. I don't think the game runs right now. It could, maybe, if I do this. It doesn't run very well, though. And it is... I just have placeholder stuff in the game. Like, I've mostly been working on stuff like this. This is an editor, so I can load levels and stuff and work on that inside of the game. And here we have some really ugly houses that I've just set up. And Do you think it works to place a unit or a character? Oh, it did. So here now I can place this character. And I walk around. No. Can't walk around. Okay. But I can move her. Oh, she can walk into buildings, behind buildings, inside buildings. And we can place some other guys here. They don't animate right now because they're broken. And we can go in here. And we can take a peek at cloud density. Does that work? Yeah, now we have some clouds here. We can also change the time scale to like 0.5. And turn on time. We have some moving shadows and whatnot. If we turn on active time and we progress the time of day back to day, we can look at shadow casting and stuff. If we look at this character here, she's standing in front of this door here. Oh, there's a cloud. But you can see she casts shadows up on the walls right now. And she can cast a shadow on the wall here, and it also casts inside there. So we got shadow casting like that. And then the what I'm working on right now is the combat, which doesn't transition into combat that well apparently, but it doesn't work very well right now. But you can move. Does it move at like ultra speed now? Yeah. Yeah, you can walk around at least. But if I try to use a command here, it's just gonna crash. Well, it didn't crash, but it's not gonna nothing is gonna happen after that point. So we need to object actions. This needs to be expanded then. Dead. End of combat. So much commented stuff here. And this should also be in their combat skills. No. But let's see. It's just such a freakishly large amount of commented code here. That's the one. That one goes... There we go. That's better. And then here we have non-combat, but this is now going to be Rhea has non-combat skills there. That should be right. So, now we need new actions. Non-combat actions. I think these won't have any categories, so all we need to do is just start writing them. Idle is an action, despite being the absence of action. So what do we need? An ID. I don't know what the ID should be. There's triple stab here. I'm not setting an ID. I don't really like having to set IDs, and I don't think I really am. So I'm just gonna set that for now. Otherwise, an action has an action name and an action length. So action name equals idle. Action length equals, I don't know. We can actually, I think, extract the length by saying LOT animation database dot entities dot pc dot ria dot non-combat actions dot idle. So here we can request the animation, and it's gonna do something like this. I don't like this at all, actually. In fact, I don't think you really need to, you shouldn't even need to request an animation. Now, it is a little bit tricky here, because I don't really know what the best way to do this is. Because on one hand, I'm kind of like loading in every single animation in the entire game on load immediately. But it's also a pixel art game, so you can load the entire game into memory like immediately. But I don't think it's a good thing to do. So this is a little tricky, because I think this should really just be pointers, like just strings pointing to like a JSON in memory or a JSON on the hard drive or something. And then when we load in RIA for a level or whatever, then we're just going to read it from the file. And that's kind of what I'm doing here. Because I'm requesting an animation, which then returns an animation. But should this work? I guess we should have a public LOT animation. But here's the question. Nah. We can just do this. So when we create the effect, we say animation equals that. And then we're gonna say animation dot animation length equals action length. That way we don't have to ever set the action length manually. We can just always infer it from the animation data. And if that is true, then we technically don't actually even need to have this animation or action length variable, because I can just always use animation.animation length because it's already set and it already exists there. It's not even, you know, it's not even a getter, it doesn't do anything, it's just a variable that I set on request animation creation. So action length can go. I do feel like it is a bit more clear to use action length, but if it's gonna be the same as animation length anyway, then I don't see the point. Because all actions will have an animation attached to it, otherwise it won't be an action. This is not needed. Now, it is actually not this simple, because animation should be a list, I think. So there we have an action. Now we also need an override for its behavior. And what we need to say here is we need to check user.facing direction. We need to say, let's see. User.action time index plus equals main controller dot current logic delta time. And then here we need to say if user.facing direction. Actually, can make a switch. And then we're gonna say case LOT direction left break. And then we're gonna say actually, what am I gonna say? How's this gonna work? So user.current animation equals animation zero user.current animation.mirror, not allow mirror. Mirror sprite equals true. I feel like it should be in current animation, maybe. I wanna change the name of these. This should be north. And the reason for that is I was using up and above as directions because I have 3 axes. And the fact that I'm using up and below, like up and above and down and below, it's ambiguous. And then here, this is then the behavior. User.actionTimeIndex plus equals main controller.currentLogic delta time. And then we're doing this, and then we're gonna use the switch, and we're gonna say if user.actionTimeIndex is greater than user.currentAnimation.animationLength, then user.actionTimeIndex equals user.actionTimeIndex minus user.currentAnimation.animationLength. Right? And now, the unfortunate part is that we have to do this for every single action. Oh, it's in movement. Movement. Not walk. So I thought I had implemented walk. I haven't actually made a walking animation, but I have some kind of like test animation. And the walk. Run. We don't have that. We'll skip that for now then. Now I have yeah. Here we have combat. So we'll put an idle in here, but it's gonna be called combat idle. Should I just call it idle? Because it's in combat.idle. But ria dot I don't have the combat idle in there. So for now, I don't know, I might have made one. So how am I gonna, how am I gonna manage this? That's my next question. Because here, I have modules, right? I have an animation module, I have a behavior module, I have a combat module. So the question is, like in combat module, I would handle combat stuff, obviously. But what about actions? Like, where am I handling actions? The data module doesn't seem like it's the right place to do that. The animation module is kind of like meaningless now. I think. Is this Unity? Yeah, this is Unity. I'm just thinking. Because I don't really like the idea of putting the actions in the data module. And the anime, I guess I should repurpose this. Because honestly, none of these things matter anymore. Not a single thing, I think. Like doing hit shake and stuff as well would just be moved over to the combat. I think. Either the combat or just the base object should have that. Because it's one of those things that could happen. Like you could use hit shake in a cutscene or, you know, whatever. So it's not necessarily a combat thing, even though it would be a combat thing, right? But it really depends on how you want to present the game too, because I think it makes sense. I think hit shakes are good for combat, but somebody getting stabbed outside of combat, like in a cutscene, I think wouldn't be a good place to use hit stun or hit shake. While when you're doing it in combat, I think it has a very vital role. Because now that I am handling the logic, like the time internally as logic, the only thing the animation system needs to do is set the sprite. That's it. It doesn't need to keep track of anything. I don't even actually have like a state machine for animations anymore. Now we're going to create a state machine for logic only, and then each action within that state machine is going to contain a sprite sheet or an animation. That animation contains timestamps, durations, and stuff. And then as the action plays out, the animation it's just checking what time are we at, which frame does that represent, set that as the sprite. That's it. And that's not enough to be a module. So the animation module should be repurposed into an action module, I think. Maybe. I think so. And here in our little module, or in our object, we're gonna ram in the hit shake. And this here, this is actually stuff that I want to have. Because we can't just have one action. We need to have this. We need to have temporary actions and requested actions and current actions. And the reason for that is, for example, if being in combat now means that your action changes from combat idle to the next action might be unsheath weapon, and the next action after that might be dual idle. And then when you're standing in your dual idle, the opponent might attack you. And from the dual idle, you then have to enter a hurt state. But we don't really want to override the dual idle. It can just be paused while we set the hurt state as a temporary animation or a temporary action that then runs its course, and once it's done, we resume the original action. And the requested action is going to be like cutscene stuff, where I might request an action at certain points in combat for story sequence reasons or whatever. And it's going to be like an override of the temporary animation as well. Like it's going to be a double override. So it'll override the regular animation, and it will override the temporary animation, and then it'll just play its behavior because it's the game engine telling it to do something because I told it to do that at a certain point. Set animation. Set action. Set animation core. Set action core. Play animation. Play action. And honestly, stuff like this, when it comes to this, I kind of doubt that checking if the new sprite is the same as our current sprite, instead of just setting the sprite every frame, is probably not faster. Because setting the sprite, that should just be changing a reference ID, which should be really fast. So I think just setting the sprite every frame, even though it's not actually changed, is just the best way to go about updating the sprite in the animation. Let's see. Rework LOT animation into LOT action module. Animation times should now be I guess. This is just what I'm doing. Animation times should now be tied to the current action time index. Then we create a state machine for actions. And I guess that's what I was doing here, right? Like, here I'm setting up all my animations, and here I was writing a state machine. But now, this is gonna be determining which action we're playing. Okay. And this is all going to be determined by the input system, pretty much. There's not gonna be that much here, because it's gonna be like anything that happens outside of combat, more or less. Or rather, anything that isn't directly controlled by the combat system. Because when you're walking, like when I'm in exploration mode and I'm walking, that's going to be handled by the object itself. Because it's going to get an input, it's going to determine what state that's going to put it in, and then it has to figure out which animation to play, it needs to figure out where to go and check collision and stuff. But when the combat system is in control, that goes out the window, because it's just gonna, like, the combat system is going to, it's not going to tell the object that it's going to be like in a state that then does this or that. It's going to demand an action. And because of that, that's not going to be part of the state tree, because that doesn't make any sense. It will, to some degree, like, the combat system is going to demand a casting animation, and then the state tree is going to return it to combat idle afterwards on its own. Whenever the end sequence of casting a spell plays, then this is going to take over again. I think. It could all be handled by states here too. Yeah, something. Anyway, I think I'm cooked for today. I'm gonna go and make some food. Might stream tonight, might not. We'll see. Anyway, thanks for hanging. Have a good day. Bye-bye.